when I was mentioning in the last lecture about the nationalists, the Chinese nationalists, and the Chinese communists, I mentioned that they did temporarily come together to fight the Japanese. Here is Chiang Kai-shek, spelled different names, or Jiang Jieshi, but he was the dictator that the United States supported, and also to a certain extent the Russians actually did in World War II. Mao is right here. Now, Chiang Kai-shek, he ruled China from 1928 to 1949, and then Taiwan for 25 years. Chairman Mao Zedong, the leader of the Communist Party of China here, on October 1st, 1949, declared the creation of the People's Republic of China. And he basically ruled until his death in 1976. I was born in 1973, so that gives you a little perspective. Mao, I just want to mention that, many historians, look at Mao in the same vein as like Hitler or Stalin. They talk about a lot of millions of deaths due to famines and all these kind of things that were brought about, political repression. So in some camps you hear about Mao in extremely negative terms, and maybe you would say it quite justifiably. On the other hand, he represented, in the way that we talked about characters, like if you looked at Ho Chi Minh or Fidel Castro, guys who stood up to him, first the Japanese, the landlords, the corrupt feudal landlords of China, then to the corrupt, not popular Chiang Kai-shek. And so Mao ends up representing a lot of positive things to many people who see a character who could resist big and powerful enemies. This book right here was known as Mao's Red Book, and for a time, young people practically worshipped his words like a god. If you look here, here's a picture of Mike Tyson. And lo and behold, Mike Tyson has a big tattoo of Mao. Now, why does he have a tattoo of Mao? I just have to ask Mike Tyson. My point is, I want you to know, is that characters like Mao have took on really popular sentiments, even though on one hand they're seen as a brutal dictator to kill lots of people. But I guarantee you that a lot of people who have Mao shirts or would tattoo themselves see him as a resistance fighter, someone who stands up to things they're against. So, in any case, that's part of the Mao legacy. We'll move on here to Korea, and this is what's difficult. It's hard to talk about Korea, China, and Japan and separate them because, again, we saw that they were neighbors, and we see that all this drama between nationalist forces and the communists were all taking place like right after World War II. And this was certainly the major set of events for the United States and like a huge foreign policy challenge for our leaders. So remember I showed you that picture before. The North was taken by the Russians. In the South, the Americans had the military occupation. Sigmund Marie was, I believe he had a PhD from Princeton or something like that. He was a well-educated man, and he pretty much gets handpicked and thrown into South Korea. Then in the North, there's Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung was a popular resistance fighter, communist, against the Japanese. And he ruled from 1948 to 1994. I graduated in 92 of high school. That's a long time, right, to be ruling. And he's called the great leader and the eternal president. As a matter of fact, he's still considered the president of North Korea. That's right, a dead man rules. But anyways, so the Korean Civil War. This is a war that most people don't know about, but it's such a deadly, intense war, especially after World War II. It's just mind-blowing. So on June 5th, 1950, North Korea launches a massive invasion across the 38th parallel. The U.S. was not going to let another country, just as what happened with China, go communist. So even though this was no direct war against Americans, the fact of having another country go communist was just unacceptable to U.S. foreign policy makers. At the same time, Americans created the UN military coalition, backed by 15 other countries, to get involved. So they were able to get a UN coalition, and this 3-year war is going to be very impactful. This is what happens. The UN coalition is led by U.S. General Douglas MacArthur, and the North gets pushed back by September, and they're very confident. But in November, MacArthur pushed over the 38th parallel into North Korea. By November, he occupied most of the North. So, here's the confidence. Look at this. Bam! Right here. Americans in the UN won. No big deal, right? Well, don't forget about China. Note to self, don't forget about China is what I put there. MacArthur's forces approached the Yalu River without declaring war on China and sent thousands of troops. Let me clarify. So as MacArthur's forces approached the Yalu River, which is bordering with China, China sent thousands of troops to aid the North without declaring war. And Bruce Cummings again talks about this. There was 2 factors. One, the Chinese really thought that the Americans were going to cross the border and invade China. And 2, there was loyalty to Koreans for all the help that they gave the Chinese in the recent Civil War. And so the Americans were obviously depicted again as evil. Look at MacArthur sacrificing babies with knives, U.S. bombs. So UN forces were caught off guard. I think I put gourd here, right? Sorry, bad spelling. And fled to the south. The UN regrouped and a stalemate developed. So the Chinese came in and really then, made everything just stop. Here was the Chinese troops crossing the Yalu River into Korea. So you see, this is how easy it is for China and Korea, for Chinese and Koreans to just crisscross, right? I'm going to stop right there. We're going to the next part of the lecture.